Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, Ba'ishim, Barakah Kudash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Ba'ishim, Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to Ya'akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off with Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 5. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which is the Greek way of saying Edom, and you so-called white people are the biblical Edomites, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. And this is going to be another video exposing you Amalekite Edomites as imposters in the land of Israel. The true children of Israel are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and in the scriptures it states that the true children of Israel would be brought back into the land by Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai, not by the hands of men, not by declarations, charters, mandates, declarations of independence, etc., etc., which is exactly how you Amalekite Edomites got the land of Israel into your possession. And the reason I wanted to do this video is because you've had a lot of Israelite celebrities lately, like Deshaun Jackson, Ice Cube, and Nick Cannon, talk about the true children of Israel and get flack from the Amalekite Edomite community saying that that's anti-Semitic to say that the so-called Negroes are the true children of Israel, when it's clearly fact. History and scriptures back it up. And not only the Negroes, but the so-called Latinos and Native Americans. And also that term Semitic is a made-up word that only came about very recently. It's actually Shem, and Shem had many sons. The Elamites are so-called East Indians or Shemites. The Moabites are so-called Chinese or Shemites. The Ishmaelites are so-called Arabs or Shemites. The Ammonites are so-called Japanese or Shemites. You Edomites or Shemites. But out of the tribe of Shem, there only came one lineage that would be the chosen line, through Abraham, then to Isaac, to Jacob, to the 12 tribes of Israel today, who are again the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. But now I'm going to just go into some secular history to show how you Idumeans, you Amalekite Idumeans, appointed the land of Israel into your possession. Here's a Wikipedia article on something called the Balfour Declaration, which set the groundwork for you Amalekite Edomites to get the land of Israel into your possession. The Balfour Declaration was a public statement issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing support for the establishment of a national home for the, and I'm not going to say that word due to YouTube's censors, so I'm just going to use the term J people in Palestine, then an Ottoman region with a small minority J population. The declaration was contained in a letter dated November 2nd, 1917, from the United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild. Lionel Walter Rothschild, 2nd Baron Rothschild, Baron de Rothschild, was a British banker, politician, zoologist, and scion of the Rothschild family, and the Rothschilds are one of the elite families and rulers of the Edomites on the planet right now, and the Rothschilds are Amalekite Edomites. A leader of the British J community for transmission to, and instead of saying the Z word, I'll just say Z-Boy, Federation of Great Britain and Ireland. The text of the declaration was published in the press on November 9th, 1917. And here's a copy of the Balfour Declaration. Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, an Amalekite Edomite, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Z-Boy aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the J people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-J communities in Palestine, or the rights and political statutes enjoyed by Jays in any other country. And then fast forward to 1948, when the Israeli Declaration of Independence was declared, when you Amalekite Edomites further got the land of Israel into your hands. The Israeli Declaration of Independence, formerly the Declaration of the Establishment of the State of Israel, was proclaimed on May 14th, 1948, by David Ben-Gurion, the executive head of the World Z-Boy Organization, chairman of the J Agency for Palestine, and soon-to-be first Prime Minister of Israel. It declared the establishment of a J state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel, which would come into effect on termination of the British Mandate at midnight that day. The event is celebrated annually in Israel with a national holiday, Independence Day, on 5 Iyar of every year, according to the Hebrew calendar. And against all Idumea, which have appointed my land into their possession, setting the groundwork with the Balfour Declaration, then further sealing the deal with the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948, with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, to cast it out for a prey. Now let's see what the aftermath of the Declaration of Independence for the State of Israel was. The declaration was signed in the context of civil war between Arab and J populations of the Mandate that had started the day after the partition vote at the UN 6 months earlier. Neighboring Arab states and the Arab League were opposed to the vote and had declared they would intervene to prevent its implementation. In a cablegram on May 15, 1948, to the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Secretary General of the League of Arab States claimed that Arab states find themselves compelled to intervene in order to restore law and order and to check further bloodshed. Over the next few days after the declaration, armies of Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, and Syria engaged Israeli troops inside the area of what had just ceased to be mandatory Palestine, thereby starting the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. A truce began on June 11th, but fighting resumed on July 8th and stopped again on July 18th, before restarting in mid-October and finally ending on July 24th, 1949, with the signing of the armistice agreement with Syria. By then, Israel had retained its independence and increased its land area by almost 50% compared to the 1947 UN partition plan. And this is another clear cut to you Amalekite Edomites, showing that you're imposters, because it also says in the scriptures that when the true children of Israel were ruling in the land again, that there would be peace in not only Israel, but across the entire planet. This is Micah chapter 4. I'm going to read verse 1 through 3. But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. The kingdom of heaven established, where the true children of Israel are going to be ruling over you heathen nations for eternity. And many nations shall come and say, Come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, and to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. And are you seeing these nations across the planet following after these Amalekite Edomites, following the Talmud, having those Shirley Temple curls, wearing all black, or having a yarmulke on their head? No, you have a lot of nations bucking up against the state of Israel because they see that the state of Israel is causing a lot of wars in the Middle East and dragging other nations into them, such as the United States of America. And they're also against how the Israelis are treating the Palestinian Arabs in the land right now, which you Palestinian Arabs who are Ishmaelites don't belong in the land either. Verse 3, and he shall judge among many people, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. And when these Amalekite Idumeans got this land into their possession, did you see war stop and these other nations destroy all their weapons? No. As we just read, after the Israeli Declaration of Independence was declared, you had the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and then you had the Korean War in the 1950s, the Vietnam War in the 1960s, a lot of civil wars in Central and South America in the 70s and 80s, the Gulf War in the early 90s, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the Syrian Civil War, etc., etc. And there's still going to be a World War III, which is going to be nuclear. Hey, you Amalekite Edomites and you Edomites in general have been completely exposed as the wicked and the devil and Satan that the Bible speaks of, and there's nothing you can do to keep prophecy from coming to its fulfillment. You're going to go down, and the children of Israel are going to be above you and rule over you. And like I said at the beginning of the video, Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai would bring the children of Israel back into their land. And not only that, but King David would be ruling in the nation of Israel again. And are you seeing King David over in the land of Israel right now? No. And David's slingshot anti-missile defense system doesn't count. This is Ezekiel 37, verse 21 to 24. And say unto them, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, not by the Balfour Declaration or the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and bring them into their own land. Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai is going to beam up the elect, the 144,000 and the rest of the righteous 1/3 onto the chariots of the Most High, which people ignorantly refer to as so-called UFOs, so they can be saved from this coming nuclear destruction. And then after the dust settles, they're going to come down from the chariots back onto the earth and put this world back in order and rule this planet from the land of Israel. And you 2/3 Israelites who were wicked and put to death on this side are going to be reborn righteous into the kingdom of heaven through the loins of the elect. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. The southern kingdom are the so-called Negroes, your so-called African Americans, Haitians, Jamaicans, Dominicans, West Indies, etc., etc., as well as the northern kingdom, the so-called Latinos and Native Americans are going to be back together, all 12 tribes united in brotherly love. And you're seeing the beginning stages of it right now with the elect from all 12 tribes waking up to their identity and coming back to their power, Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai, and not having an evil eye towards a brother in another tribe. And this is another cut to you Amalekite Edomites. There are plenty of videos out there showing people asking you where the other tribes are, and you'll say, they're across the Euphrates River, or you'll make up some other asinine excuse. You Amalekite Edomites like to say that you're of the tribe of Judah, but where are the rest of the tribes? Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions, because the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai are going to be in the nation of Israel. They're never going to transgress the law or be wicked again, which is another cut to you Amalekite Edomites, because of what's going on over in the land of Israel right now. They have kosher pork, and every June they have a pride parade. Tel Aviv is known as Pink City, and the state of Israel is one of the hot spots for the LGBTQ movement globally. And here's Hebrews chapter 8, verse 8 through 11 to further elaborate on how the laws, statutes, and commandments are going to be in the nation of Israel. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, the northern kingdom, and the house of Judah, the southern kingdom, The new covenant being, again, the laws, statutes, and commandments in the nation of Israel. And the new covenant hasn't happened yet. That's where you Christians err. Because while the elect of the nation of Israel right now are following the laws, statutes, and commandments to the best of their ability, we can't keep all the laws. We're going to need those new spiritual bodies to keep all the laws. And even then, the new covenant, the old covenant, the promises, the mercies, the laws, statutes, and commandments are only for the nation of Israel. Just go to Romans chapter 9 and read the first couple of verses to see that fact. And it's the Apostle Paul, which you Christians like to say is the apostles of the Gentiles, saying that Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai is only for the nation of Israel. And those Gentiles he was talking to were not heathen Gentiles. They were Israelite Gentiles living like the heathen nations back then. Just as you had the Israelites living like the heathen nations now, before they woke up to their identity and came back to their power, Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their minds, and write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a power, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. And again, the new covenant is only for the nation of Israel. If you heathens were going to be a part of the new covenant, then why does it say back in Micah chapter 4 verse 2 that you're going to have to come to the nation of Israel to learn the laws, statutes, and commandments? And many nations shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, and to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the law shall go forth of Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. Yahweh Ba'ishim Yahushai is only dealing with the nation of Israel. And when the true children of Israel are ruling again, even you Amalekite Edomites are going to have to learn the law from us. But I will save them out of all their dwelling places wherein they have sinned, and I will cleanse them. So shall they be my people, and I will be their power. And David, my servant, shall be king over them. And this isn't talking about David's slingshot anti-missile defense system. King David is going to be back in the flesh, ruling over the nation of Israel. And even then, above King David is going to be King Yahushai HaMashiach, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, and above Yahushai, King Yahweh, the Most High. And below King David is going to be the rest of the 12 apostles, because if you can receive it, King David was the Apostle Peter in the reincarnation, and then below the 12 apostles, the rest of the 144,000, and then below the rest of the 144,000, the rest of the righteous 1/3, and underneath the rest of the righteous 1/3, the 2/3 of the nation of Israel, who are going to be righteous in the kingdom of heaven. And they all shall have one shepherd. They shall also walk in my judgments, and observe my statutes, and do them. So with this video, I hope you sincere Akim are edified. Just keep strong and keep pushing this word. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathens, chiefly Esau, Edom. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.